The mortgager and mortgagee differ the one from the other, not more in length of purse than the jester and jestee do, and that of memory. But in this the comparison between them runs, as the scholiasts call it, upon all four, which by the by is upon one or two legs more than some of the best of Homers can pretend to. Namely, that the one raises a sum and the other a laugh at your expense, and thinks no more about it. Interest, however, still runs on in both cases. The periodical or accidental payments of it, just serving to keep the memory of the affair alive till, at length, in some evil hour, pop comes the creditor upon each, and by demanding principal upon the spot, together with full interest to the very day, makes them both feel the full extent of their obligations. As the reader, for I hate your ifs, has a thorough knowledge of human nature, I need not say more to satisfy him that my hero could not go on at this rate without some slight experience of these incidental mementos. To speak the truth, he had wantonly involved himself in a multitude of small book debts of this stamp, which, notwithstanding Eugenius's frequent advice, he too much disregarded, thinking that as not one of them was contracted through any malignancy, but on the contrary, from an honesty of mind and a mere jocundity of humor, they would all of them be crossed out in course. Eugenius would never admit this, and would often tell him that one day or other he would certainly be reckoned with, and he would often add in an accent of sorrowful apprehension to the uttermost might. To which Yorick, with his usual carelessness of heart, would as often answer with a pshaw, and if the subject was started in the fields, with a hop, skip, and a jump at the end of it, but if close pent up in the social chimney corner, where the culprit was barricaded in with a table and a couple of armchairs and could not so readily fly off in a tangent, Eugenius would then go on with his lecture upon discretion in words to this purpose, though somewhat better put together. Trust me, dear Yorick, this unwary pleasantry of thine will sooner or later bring thee into scrapes and difficulties which no after wit can extricate thee out of. In these sallies, too oft I see it happens that a person laughed at considers himself in the light of a person injured, with all the rights of such a situation belonging to him, and when thou viewest him in that light too, and reckons up his friends, his family, his kindred and allies, and musters up with them the many recruits which will list under him from a sense of common danger, 'tis no extravagant arithmetic to say that for every 10 jokes thou hast got 100 enemies, until thou hast gone on and raised a swarm of wasps about thine ears, and art half stung to death by them, thou wilt never be convinced it is so. I cannot suspect it in the man whom I esteem that there is the least spur from spleen or malevolence of intent in these sallies. I believe and know them to be truly honest and sportive, but consider, my dear lad, that fools cannot distinguish this, and that knaves will not, and thou knowest not what it is, either to provoke the one or to make merry with the other. Whenever they associate for mutual defense, depend upon it, they will carry on the war in such a manner against thee, my dear friend, as to make thee heartily sick of it, and of thy life too. Revenge from some baneful corner shall level a tale of dishonor at thee, which no innocence of heart or integrity of conduct shall set right. The fortunes of thy house shall totter. Thy character, which led the way to them, shall bleed on every side of it. Thy faith questioned, thy works belied, thy wit forgotten, thy learning trampled on. To wind up the last scene of thy tragedy, cruelty and cowardice, twin ruffians, hired and set on by malice in the dark, shall strike together at all thy infirmities and mistakes. The best of us, my dear lad, lie open there. And trust me, Yorick, when to gratify a private appetite it is once resolved upon that an innocent and an helpless creature shall be sacrificed, 'tis an easy matter to pick up sticks enough from any thicket where it has strayed to make a fire to offer it up with. Yorick scarce ever heard the sad vaticination of his destiny read over to him, but with a tear stealing from his eye and a promissory look attending it, that he was resolved for the time to come to ride his tit with more sobriety. But alas, too late, a grand confederacy with blank and blank at the head of it, was formed before the first prediction of it. The whole plan of the attack, just as Eugenius had foreboded, was put in execution all at once, with so little mercy on the side of the allies and so little suspicion in York of what was carrying on against him, that when he thought, good easy man, full surely preferment was ripening, they had smote his root, and then he fell, as many a worthy man had fallen before him. Yorick, however, fought it out with all imaginable gallantry for some time, till overpowered by numbers and worn out at length by the calamities of the war, but more so by the ungenerous manner in which it was carried on, he threw down the sword, and though he kept up his spirits and appearance to the last, he died nevertheless, as was generally thought, quite broken-hearted. What inclined Eugenius to the same opinion was as follows. A few hours before Yorick breathed his last, Eugenius stepped in with an intent to take his last sight and last farewell of him. Upon his drawing Yorick's curtain and asking how he felt himself, Yorick, looking up to his face, took hold of his hand, and after thanking him for the many tokens of his friendship to him, for which he said, if it was their fate to meet hereafter, he would thank him again and again, he told him he was within a few hours of giving his enemies the slip forever. I hope not, answered Eugenius, with tears trickling down his cheeks and with the tenderest tone that ever man spoke. I hope not, Yorick, said he. Yorick replied with a look up and a gentle squeeze of Eugenius's hand, and that was all, but it cut Eugenius to his heart. Come, come, Yorick, both Eugenius wiping his eyes and summoning up the man within him. My dear lad, he comforted, let not all thy spirits and fortitude forsake thee at this crisis when thou most wants them. Who knows what resources are in store and what the power of God may yet do for thee? Yorick laid his hand upon his heart and gently shook his head. For my part, continued Eugenius, crying bitterly as he uttered the words, I declare I know not, Yorick, how to part with thee, and would gladly flatter my hopes, added Eugenius, cheering up his voice, that there is still enough left of thee to make a bishop, and that I may live to see it. I beseech you, Eugenius, quoth Yorick, taking off his nightcap as well as he could with his left hand, his right being still grasped close in that of Eugenius. I beseech thee to take a view of my head. I see nothing that ails it, replies Eugenius. Then, alas, my friend, said Yorick, let me tell you that 'tis so bruised and misshapen with the blows which blank and some others have so unhandsomely given me in the dark, that I might say with Sancho Panza that should I recover, and meteors thereupon be suffered to rain down from heaven as thick as hail, not one of them would fit it. Yorick's last breath was hanging upon his trembling lips, ready to depart as he uttered this, yet still it was uttered with something of a Cervantic note. And as he spoke it, Eugenius could perceive a stream of lambent fire lighted up for a moment in his eyes. Faint picture of these flashes of his spirit, which, as Shakespeare said of his ancestor, were wont to set the table in a roar. Eugenius was convinced from this that the heart of his friend was broke. He squeezed his hand and then walked softly out of the room, weeping as he walked. Yorick followed Eugenius with his eyes to the door. He then closed them and never opened them more. He lies buried in the corner of his churchyard in the parish of Blank under a plain marble slab, which his friend Eugenius, by leave of his executors, laid upon his grave with no more than these 3 words of inscription, serving both for his epitaph and elegy. Alas, poor Yorick! 10 times a day has Yorick's ghost the consolation to hear his monumental inscription read over with such a variety of plaintive tones as denote a general pity and esteem for him. A footway crossing the churchyard, close by the side of his grave, not a passenger goes by without stopping to cast a look upon it, and citing as he walks on, Alas, poor Yorick! It is so long since the reader of this rhapsodical work has been parted from the midwife that it is high time to mention her again to him, merely to put him in mind that there is such a body still in the world, in whom, upon the best judgment I can form upon my own plan to present, I am going to introduce to him for good and all, but as fresh matter may be started and much unexpected business fall out betwixt the reader and myself, which may require immediate dispatch, 'twas right to take care that the poor woman should not be lost in the meantime, because when she is wanted, we can no way do without her. I think I told you that this good woman was a person of no small note and consequence throughout our whole village and township, that her fame had spread itself to the very out-edge and circumference of that circle of importance, of which kind every soul living, whether he has a shirt to his back or no, has one surrounding him, which said circle, by the way, whenever 'tis said that such a one is of great weight and importance in the world, I desire may be enlarged or contracted in your worship's fancy, in a compound ratio of that station, profession, knowledge, abilities, height and depth, measuring both ways, of the personage brought before you. In the present case, if I remember, I fixed it about 4 or 5 miles, which not only comprehended the whole parish, but extended itself to 2 or 3 of the adjacent hamlets in the skirts of the next parish, which made a considerable thing of it. I must add that she was, moreover, very well looked on at one large grange house and some other houses, some odd houses and farms within 2 or 3 miles, as I said, from the smoke of her own chimney. But I must here once for all inform you that all this will be more exactly delineated and explained in a map now in the hands of the engraver, which, with many other pieces and developments of this work, will be added to the end of the 20th volume, not to swell the work, I detest the thought of such a thing, but by way of a commentary, scholium, illustration, and key to such passages, incidents, or innuendos as shall be thought to be either of private interpretation or of dark or doubtful meaning after my life and my opinion shall have been read over. Now don't forget the meaning of the word by all the world, which betwixt you and me, and in spite of all the gentlemen reviewers in Great Britain, and of all that their worship shall undertake to write or say to the contrary, I am determined shall be the case. I need not tell your worship that all this is spoken confidence. Upon looking into my mother's marriage settlement in order to satisfy myself and reader in a point necessary to be cleared up before we could proceed any farther in this history, I had the good fortune to pop upon the very thing I wanted before I had read a day and a half straight forwards. It might have taken me up a month, which shows plainly that when a man sits down to write a history, though it be but the history of Jack Hickathrift or Tom Thumb, he knows no more than his heels what lets and confounded hindrances he is to meet within his way, or what a dance he may be led by one excursion or another before all is over. Could a historiographer drive on his history as a muleter drives on his mule, straight forward, for instance, from either to the right hand or to the left, for instance, from Rome all the way to Loretto, without ever once turning his head aside either to the right hand or to the left, he might venture to foretell you to an hour when he should get to his journey's end, but the thing is, morally speaking, impossible. For if he is a man of the least spirit, he will have 50 deviations from a straight line to make with this or that party as he goes along, which he can no ways avoid. He will have views and prospects to himself perpetually soliciting his eye, which he can no more help standing still to look at than he can fly. He will moreover have various accounts to reconcile, anecdotes to pick up, inscriptions to make out, stories to weave in, traditions to sift, personages to call upon, panegyrics to paste up at his door, pasquinades at that, all which both the man and his mule are quite exempt from. To sum up all, there are archives at every stage to be looked into, and rolls, records, documents, and endless genealogies, which justice ever and anon calls him back to stay the reading of. In short, there's no end of it. For my own part, I declare I have been at it these 6 weeks, making all the speed I possibly could, and am not yet born. I have just been able, and that's all, to tell you when it happened, but not how, so that you see the thing is yet far from being accomplished. These unforeseen stoppages, which I own I had no conception of when I first set out, but which I am convinced now will rather increase than diminish as I advance, but have struck out a hint which I am resolved to follow, and that is, not to be in a hurry, but to go on leisurely, writing and publishing 2 volumes of my life every year, which, if I am suffered to go on quietly, and can make a tolerable bargain with my bookseller, I shall continue to do as long as I live.